good evening. My name is Marie Francis Rivera, and I'm a grad student here at Northeastern's Law and Public Policy program. So my question is, in the past decade, state funding to the city has declined by 60%, and state aid to the Boston Public Schools has fallen by 30%. In my work with young people, they share stories about crumbling facilities and not having enough toilet paper in their schools and not even having enough books to complete their assignments. And this past year, there was a contentious debate at the State House about raising taxes to fund transportation, education, and other essential services. How would you use your influence to move this dialogue forward?
Let's reverse the order and start with you, Ayanna. We'll go the other way.
Okay. Well, although that is outside of our personal jurisdiction, that never means that we need to recuse our opportunity and our leverage as elected officials to lobby aggressively, be it letter writing, testifying at hearings, making phone calls, which I certainly have done. And on that issue in particular, I championed quite vigorously the need for that increase, in particular because I wanted to see a greater investment in early ed and care. We have a growing wait list of about 30,000 children who don't have the opportunity for early ed and care, and that has everything to do with destabilizing families, setting them on a pathway to living on the margins because people cannot return to work if they don't have safe and affordable care, and also contributing ultimately to disparities in our education system and our achievement gap because they're not getting those early supports and interventions. So lobby, 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 not only as a counselor, but that is something I hope that our next mayor will do as well.
That's a really good question. I think the challenging thing from the city of Boston is twofold. In one sense, when you calculate it with the state, we have such a great economic impact in conjunction with other cities in the state. But constitutionally, the state supersedes Boston, and so we can't directly take the revenue that we put into the state and then demand a full return back. There's been things that I've done in the past. The mayor had the quote-unquote cheeseburger tax that we were able to use the argument that you're making to get some revenue back into the city. In reference to the governor's transportation bill, I certainly would have been close to voting on that. I didn't really particularly like the middle of the road way that people took on that. I felt it was very reflexive. It was something people were doing, I think, to concern some of their political objectives, which I understand. Raising taxes is not an easy thing, specifically when you're dealing with a state legislation that is outside of just the city scope, and you're dealing with a lot of different people who have different constituencies that are in the suburbs, and these issues aren't sometimes as important. But I most likely probably would have voted on the governor's transportation bill.
Michelle?
As with transportation, I think city officials with regards to education and local aid have an important role to play in lobbying the state. And that involves not just pushing state government, but also reaching to grassroots level and engaging parents and engaging stakeholders in Boston, giving them a way to participate, to share that information about how to get involved, what phone numbers to call to reach your state legislators, et cetera. And I think aside from that, as that battle is going on, and as a city councilor, I would certainly be very involved in advocating for Boston in that battle. I would also push to have those conversations with the resources that we have in the city to think about other creative partnerships to fund our schools. There are so many organizations in Boston, companies, universities who want to help and who want to plug in, who may not have the time and energy to go out and actively schedule every school to come in and take a tour of their campuses. But if the city could facilitate a program, there are many partners that anyone would plug in.
Clarify, I meant if I were in the state legislature, I would have voted, as opposed to I couldn't vote for it if I was on the city council. I don't want someone to tweet that out and make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about.
But you can be great advocates. You can be great advocates. Annissa.
Thank you. I am a Boston public school teacher. I've been a teacher for 12 years at East Boston High. And one of the things we are faced with every single day in the schools is we are strapped for resources and cash. And I think that it's incredibly important as a city council that we advocate for our schools, for what we're doing in our public schools, to make sure that we have access to the greatest assets. And that includes our school buildings, are top-notch, our learning tools are the first class, best we can provide our students, that our athletic facilities are number one. I'm a softball coach at the high school. I was a softball coach at my high school, and I think it's incredibly important that our students get the best of everything. And as city councilors for the city of Boston, we need to advocate to our peers at the State House and work with them and stress on them that we need back what we put in to give our kids what they deserve.
Steve?
Marie, thanks for the question. It's something we deal with on a daily basis. Down economies affect cities too, and the mayor and the 13 members of the council have been dealing the last couple of years with the down economy. We used to get 33% of our budget from state aid. This year it's down to 15%. They've cut back $400 million in local aid to the city of Boston over the last 7 budget cycles. So it's a real problem. It's not just the educational component, it's every city and town department that has been cut back, and we've had to kind of rework our numbers to keep services going in that way. One of the reasons we voted on the budget this year, we required the school department to come up with a 5-year capital plan because their planning process was willy-nilly. Another thing I would support is getting decentralization to the schools, to get the principals to get their take on how to run a school and not have everything come from the Court Street building.
Marty, welcome.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks for joining us.
Sorry for arriving late. Actually, can I hear the question again? I heard all the answers, but I think it's one of those things where the question might have been diluted.
Sure. So I'm Marie Francis. The question was, in the past decade, state funding to the city has declined by 60%, and state aid to the Boston Public Schools has fallen by 30%. In my work with young people, they talk about crumbling facilities, not having enough books, not having toilet paper in the bathrooms. And this past year, there was the debate at the State House about raising taxes to fund transportation, education, and other essential services. So how would you use your influence as City Council to move that dialogue
Well,
forward?
first of all, it's outrageous that we deplete the funding that way. If I get elected to the City Council, and I hope I do, Boston Public Schools is my first passion. I know the number 1 issue in the City of Boston is public safety, but the Boston Public Schools, that's my passion. I'm a former Boston Public School student. I dropped out of high school. I knew how hard it was to get a job being a dropout. I got my GED, went to BC, and then went to law school. Still couldn't even find a job as a lawyer. The number 1 role of the Boston City Council is that, obviously we can't add to the city's budget. That comes to the mayor. Yeah. But our role as a city council, we're the voice of the people. We work for you. If I get elected to the City Council, I will be up at the State House as much as possible. I will be talking to my colleagues at the state level, at the federal level, if I have to increase the funding. Because the problem with the City of Boston is that our public schools need to do better for our kids and for our neighborhoods, period. A kid who drops out of high school doesn't drop out because he just drops out. There are other problems going on, and the school might be the only place where we find these problems. Problems with violence at home, single-parent families, drug abuse, etc. But if I get elected to the City Council, I would be a strong advocate. You'll hear me out there yelling. I will increase the budget any way I can. Thank you.
My name's Jeff Ross. I was at the rally actually up there at the State House in support of Boston residents to get more funding back to our education system. And I've been out there on the campaign trail advocating for early childhood evaluation of all of the Boston Public School students for childhood trauma and violence, learning disabilities, and English as a second language, because we need those funds and resources to come back into the city. And I think that there is legislation pending up there. I've been advocating that it get passed all summer. If I get elected, I will be up there working on that. I would also say that we've been able to bring money into the city's tax levies by 4 to 5% a year, increasing that as we have lost state aid. I think we have to continue to look for creative ways to do that. We only get 0.75% of sales meals tax and jet fuel tax back from the state. So we need our local legislators here and our Boston delegation to lean on the state and get more of those resources back here. I think it's critical for improving the schools and getting us the infrastructure that we need with a limited city budget. Thanks.
Mike?
Thank you, Governor. The City of Boston and the Boston City Council oversees a $2.6 billion budget. And I've always subscribed to, before I go into working families' pockets and ask them to be feed or to be fined more or to be taxed more, that we do our own inventory, that we put in place performance-based management systems, that we eliminate wasteful spending. I can identify a number of departments in a number of city functions currently that are wasting tax dollars. With respect to our schools, I've been a strong advocate for school site budgeting. Let's get those budget decisions out of the bloated bureaucracy down at Court Street and put them in the hands of teachers and principals that know our children. We also currently, we're on pace to be at $100 million for school transportation, zigzagging school children all across our city through 3 start times. Tens of millions too much that could, quite frankly, go into the classroom for smaller class size, extended school day, textbooks, and now toilet paper.
Second question. Incidentally, folks, you ought to take a good look at these so-called job-creating tax incentives that people began passing after I left office. Just want to add that. There's $1 billion of these things out there. I don't think they create a single job except for accountants who look for them. Businesses don't hire people to give them a tax incentive. They hire people because they need them. And that's $1 billion out there. We all ought to be focusing on it. Yes?
Thanks. So again, Marie Francis. And my next question is, almost 40 years ago, in federal Judge Garrity's ruling to desegregate Boston public schools, he mandated hiring at least 25% black teachers in order to reflect the black student population at the time. BPS continues to face criticism for their lack of teachers of color. Currently, there are 48% teachers of color to the 84% students of color in the system. What's your plan to fix this?
Mike, why don't we start with you and
Sure.
go back the other way?
As a parent with children that attend the Boston Public Schools, I want the best teacher available, whether it's black, white, Asian, Latino. That's our most important critical function is the education of our children. And making sure that they have the best top quality education available is paramount to me. And that could be a quality public school, it could be a quality charter school, it could be a quality parochial school, or it could be a quality private school in your community. I want quality schools for our children. What I would be putting a focus on with respect to the city of Boston is to have a cabinet, to have commissioners and superintendents, the decision makers, finally look like the face of Boston. And that hasn't happened in 20 years. I've made a focal point of my campaign to talk about that we have lots of city workers. There are lots of people that work for the Boston Public Schools that are people of color, but the decision makers, the leaders, do not look like the face of the city. And we get some bright, talented minds that call Boston their home right now. No need for a nationwide search. I get real parochial here. The best and brightest live in the city of Boston. Let's tap those resources.
Jeff?
I come from, my family unit is a biracial, socioeconomically stratified family unit, and I have had to work within that unit to build bridges and break down barriers. It's been my life's passion and my life's work here in the city of Boston. I think that we need to look at, when we are choosing a new school superintendent, to apply the same criteria that we have for all of the candidates, but we need to try to hire people in Boston who will create pipelines of leadership development and opportunity for people. And I'm running to break down barriers in the city. I think that we need to diversify the top levels of our city government and continue to do outreach to folks and make sure that we're being an inclusive city when we're making hiring decisions. So I'd love to partner with you on that, Marie.
And as a former student of the Boston Public Schools and a lifelong resident of Boston, I remember what Boston was like 40 years ago. I would have to tell you, if you don't already know, that the city is much more diversified than it was 40 years ago. I know under the former superintendent, the amount of people of color teachers went down, I think, from 27 to 22%. I think that the next superintendent should put an emphasis on making sure that the school faculty represents the population of the school, but not at the expense of having someone there who's qualified, well-trained, etc. I also think that the next superintendent of the Boston Public Schools should work with our colleges and universities to find the talent here, because the talent is in this town. If we have to go out of town to find talent, that's pathetic, because it's here. It's at Northeastern University. It's at Boston College. It's at Boston University. But anyway, I would work, and I hope if I get on the education committee, I would work with the superintendent to make sure not only the school staff is diversified and represents the population of the city, but the entire administration does.
Steve?
Well, the real answer to the question is I could use my advocacy as a member of the city council to try to boost those numbers. I believe that the workforce should look like the population of the city, and I believe that across every department that it should. The city council has no jurisdiction over who the superintendent of schools hires or who, frankly, a principal hires at their school. The only thing the city council can do is cut the city's budget, the school department's budget. We can approve it, we can cut it. No one wants to cut a budget, especially in a tough fiscal time. That's the limits of our city's charter, gives that to the city council. So I can tell you that I would use my best efforts of advocacy, as the governor said, You could be advocates. I could be an advocate to try to get you to where the numbers should be. And that's about the best I could do.
Please.
Thank you. Again, I'm a Boston Public School teacher, so I live with this day in and day out. I think that it's incredibly important, like others have said, that we need to make sure that all of our city's departments reflect the city. And one of the best ways for us to create and maintain a diversified workforce, especially in our teaching positions, is to recruit, train, and keep Bostonians here so that they will come and teach in our schools. And one of the things we need to do as a school department or as a city is to promote what's working so well in our schools so that it's an attractive workforce opportunity, work opportunity. Every day on the campaign trail when I say to people, I'm a high school teacher, they say, oh, how do you do that? That's, it's amazing work. And I'm like, I love my work. I've got an incredible career. I've got an incredible job. My students are incredible. But we as a city have let the press get away with sort of the bad things that are happening, but the good far outweighs the bad. And we need to promote what's working so well in our schools so that we can attract more talent into the schools and we can keep more talent to teach our kids.
Right. I think we all agree that on the benefits of having a diverse experience in the school system and throughout the ranks of the city's workers overall. I think for me, even more important than diversity is inclusion and really making sure that there is enough cultural competency training and that all around the experience of being in the schools is pleasant for the students and for the staff, that there are decent working conditions and that the contract is one that allows a teacher to have a sustainable lifestyle and have a family of their own and not just be working incredibly long hours and then helping students outside of classroom hours and then not making enough to make ends meet. So I think it has to be a livable experience to be a teacher, and we need to support that and then really focus on the outreach side. I would love to see more pipelines, specific mentorship programs and opportunities where Boston youth get the opportunity to shadow teachers in the Boston Public Schools and a dedicated way to really retain teachers, especially in years 3 through 8, where I hear there's a sharp drop-off in new teachers leaving.
This is a great question. I think, as some people have already mentioned, it's recruitment, and then I would also add, but marketing before the recruitment. We have an undertone right now that teachers are somehow not a respected profession anymore, and it's outrageous, and it has to stop. Talking about finances when it comes to like the BTU is a separate conversation when we actually, the undertone that I see in the media and the conversation that we have in regards to the school budget and when it comes to teachers, it's just ridiculous. And we have to start pushing back on that as city councilors when we talk about advocacy. We can do that by highlighting the good work that teachers do and by focusing it on the media to show that teaching profession is a very good profession. It's a profession that economically can be prosperous, which I think is how then you come into a recruitment phase, because when we talk about jobs, people that are community oriented, in my opinion, probably would look at teaching as a profession that they would pursue, but the profession of teaching now in a public sense has become so rooted in this twisted sense of just negativity that we just have to stop that, and it has to stop, and it's all over the place, and it's really, in my opinion, it's making the issue around school reform in general toxic to the point where we can't even have a legitimate debate on it. So we have to first uplift teachers and the teaching profession in the public sense, and then I think we recruit after.
I thank you for the question, and I actually held a public hearing about this. One, the need for our teaching force to reflect the students, but also to specifically address not just the racial component there, but the gender component. We've seen a real feminization of education, and I believe we're dealing with a male teacher shortage crisis in particular that I really do see as contributing to our achievement gap. I agree with many of the comments that here relative to cultural competency and outreach. It's very important that we meet people where they are. So coming out of that public hearing, I've been working with our Boston Teacher, BTR, Boston Teacher Residency Program, the Black Educators Alliance of Massachusetts, or a concerted sort of roadmap for how we can make sure we're casting the net wide. But the cycle will just repeat. If you don't see yourself reflected, then that's going to compromise your aspiration in seeing yourself in that position. The last thing I want to say, I just want to caution us, and I know no one means anything ill, but it makes me uncomfortable whenever we're talking about diversity, whether it's with our police force or our teaching force. There's the implication that, well, not at the expense of public safety or quality school. It doesn't have to be. There are plenty of talented Black, brown people who are qualified for these positions. We just have to be committed to casting the net wide and recruiting them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answers.
And of course, one of the things we like to do occasionally is say thanks to the teachers, don't you think? Who does that? We've got the best public school system in America in this state. Nobody says thank you. I mean, we're number one, and nobody says thank you.